My friends, every indication points towards an imminent start of Ukraine's offensive.
Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
And the fact that Ukraine has been ramping up its probing attacks is also not a surprise. In the now famous documents, it was reported that all assault brigades would be done training by early May. Now by the time they all get deployed to the front, perhaps another 2 weeks before the big fireworks. That means by May 14th, we're right on time. And Ukrainians regrouped their forces. There has been this strong Ukrainian counterattack towards the Siversky Donetsk Canal, carried out by the 3rd Assault Brigade AZOV, one of Ukraine's most elite formations. This offensive was combined with a sortie from Ivanivske, which managed to storm a couple Russian positions as well as capture a few Russian POWs. Another push was also reported north of BAKHMUT towards Bahtanivka. However, I talked a lot about this possible outcome in my previous videos. The AZOV tactical group, estimated at 13,000 men, centered on the presence of the 3rd AZOV Assault Brigade. So this might give us another clue as to what the Ukrainians are preparing. How I see the plan is that BAKHMUT has to hold in order to pin down as many Russian forces at the center. This is when the northern group would attack like a punch going south, coupled with another strike from the south across the Donbass Canal. Everyone knew where the attack would take place. The task for the Russians was not that complicated. Hold the canal. They literally have one job. Their only problem would be the intervention of the Russian Air Force because of their lack of air defense. Ukraine may run out of air defense by May. Kyiv is depleting its last reserves of S-300 missiles, making it possible for Russia to achieve air superiority. 89% of Ukraine's air defense was covered by Soviet-era S-300 and Buk systems, whose ammunition, according to the documents, are projected to be fully depleted by May 3rd. This is now. We're beyond that. So if all this is true, you see, as an image, attacking without air defense is like attempting your bench press PR without a spotter. Very risky. Either you'll be the most badass guy in town, or you'll go straight to the hospital. In other words, Ukraine has to find ways to deal devastating blows to the enemy while bypassing its air defense limitations. Without proper air defense, the Russian Air Force will be able to target the advancing Ukrainian columns, as well as reinforcements and supply convoys. There are more and more reports of FAB-500 glide bombs, like here near Velika Novosilka, where they are used against Ukrainian groupings. Glide bombs are a bit of a cheat code, because they're launched from the safety of Russian airspace, and thus out of range of Ukrainian air defense. However, the good news for Ukraine is that these FAB bombs can mostly be used against static targets. So according to the documents, Ukraine only has 11% of what it needs to defend its airspace. That means that Ukraine would have to concentrate its anti-aircraft launchers right where they plan to attack in order to cover the airspace of its assault formation. However, this would also give up any element of surprise. Mr. Podolyak, the advisor of the president of Ukraine, said, "The counteroffensive is not one battle that will decide everything, but a series of events." And after reading this, I just had a flash. Ukraine could very well compensate its lack of air defense with creativity and surprise. And that was exactly the mindset of the Viet Cong during the Tet Offensive of 1968. The famous Tet Offensive was elaborated by North Vietnamese General Giap. Our line is not merely military, but an overall policy comprehensively combining military, politics, and diplomacy. The Tet Offensive was both military and political. And this could be exactly what the Ukrainians are planning. And notice how just like the Viet Cong started their offensive during the Vietnamese Tet Spring celebrations, the Ukrainians waited for the Russian May 9th celebrations to launch the attack. The Ukrainians could overload the Russian defenses and strike at multiple places with lots of different types of attacks. Welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. Remember that if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, just like with many other commentators, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped. And welcome to the headquarters. But the Ukrainians might take out a trump card. According to the Washington Post, the UK will provide Ukraine with the ATACMS missiles that have a range of 300 kilometers. And truth be told, they probably already have them. While the Ukrainians are bombarding the Russians, these armored columns could navigate through Russian fortifications with the help of the 10,000 drone operators that Ukraine has trained in the past few months. These drones could either be for recon purposes, so to literally guide these columns and help the artillery provide suppressive fire, or they could also launch swarms of kamikaze drones on vital Russian positions. While all this is taking place, the Ukrainians are also continuing to probe across the Dnieper. It was reported that late on May 9th, reconnaissance groups of the armed forces of Ukraine crossed over the river using 7 boats and landed on the island of Kruglik at the mouth of the Dnieper. All this is done to establish forward positions in order to allow a large-scale amphibious operation. This is where the Ukrainians take out their second secret card. There were also some reports that the Ukrainian Navy purchased 5,000 diving tugs to be used in amphibious operations on the Dnieper. All this diving equipment would mean that the soldiers would not be exposed to enemy fire while crossing over to the other side of the river, which is the most dangerous part of the operation. Even if that number might be exaggerated, we could have hundreds of small Ukrainian units going on the other side of the river and establish little breachheads without the Russians being able to do anything. That also means that preparations for the assault on the Zaporozhye power plant are in full swing, since Ukrainians could infiltrate hundreds of small sabotage groups to create havoc behind enemy lines and secure a breachhead, so the reinforcements don't have to cross the river under enemy fire. And this is where Ukraine's Marine Infantry Landing Force, MILF, could intervene in order to really make it like a Tet offensive. The Ukrainians could already have a bunch of camouflage sabotage units all over Russian-controlled territory that could plant explosives on critical infrastructure on D-Day. And if we crank up the level of chaos one more step, if the Ukrainians manage to find a little gap in the Russian airspace, they could even launch airborne operations. In the past few days, Ukraine received 14 Mi-8 from Croatia. Each of these helicopters can carry 23 troops. So 14 units could insert 336 Ukrainian paratroopers behind enemy lines. But they have a lot of smaller helicopters that could also bring troops. But in theory, they could disembark some 500 men in an entire battalion. Just imagine an airborne operation against Melitopol, and where the paratroopers raise the Ukrainian flag at the city center. Dozens of videos would go around Telegram. This would be pure informational warfare in order to spread fear and chaos.
Our men are running from the battlefield! Shame for this play!
This would be an example of a political victory. However, if we're more conservative, the Ukrainian helicopters could disembark the paratroopers somewhere around Energodar at nighttime. Crimea could also be subject to an attack. Ukrainians have been increasing drone swarm attacks on Sebastopol. On the 28th of April, Ukrainian drones destroyed an oil depot, which created a huge fire. They repeated the attack on May 7th. That day, they launched 23 drones from Odessa in 3 groups towards Sebastopol. 22 of the drones were civilian UAV model Mugin 5. The Russians claimed that all the drones of this previous attack had been down using electronic warfare. However, never forget that the defense has to be always right, whereas the attacker only has to be successful once. These drones could also be meant to map out Russian air defense systems in order to find gaps for larger missile strikes. These could be done to cripple the Russian Black Sea Fleet, whose destruction would also be another political victory for Ukraine. Apart from missile strikes, they're also trying a new method, in an attempt to repeat the Italian 1941 frogman raid on Alexandria, but with 21st century technology. On April 24th, Ukraine launched 3 unmanned speedboats towards the Sebastopol Bay, but were detected and destroyed. These naval kamikaze drones have a range of 400 kilometers, and that means that they can be launched from anywhere from the Ukrainian coastline. Their 200 kilogram warhead can sink a surface vessel if it hits the front portion of the ship. So perhaps this is what Ukraine meant with lots of different events. And for maximum efficiency, all these attacks could be coordinated. Once again, at the moment, the only weak spot of the Ukrainian military would be the status of its air defense. Another discussion is how many launchers Ukraine has left. Prior to the Russian invasion, Ukraine had around 100 functional S-300 batteries. A typical S-300 battery comprises an engagement radar, an early warning acquisition radar, and 3 unit launchers, each with 4 missiles. So a S-300 regiment usually consists of 4 batteries, meaning 12 launchers. And overall, at the beginning of the war, Ukraine had about 300 operating S-300 launchers. Now, according to Superpower Ukrainian Oryx, there are 56 visually confirmed S-300 losses for Ukraine, without taking into account all the ones that were destroyed in warehouses. More on that later. How about we spice things up with a little PowerPoint presentation? On the 26th of April, the Ukrainian Air Force reported to have destroyed 5 Lancet drones and 1 Merlin reconnaissance UAV. Yes, Ukraine did destroy 5 Lancets, but this was done by ramming their irreplaceable heavy anti-aircraft missile systems into them. On April 26, the Russians reported to have destroyed an entire Ukrainian air defense division within an hour north of Kherson. Apparently, 4 S-300 launchers were hit. Get back to the PowerPoint so it seems more professional. The first attack happened on the eastern outskirts of the village of Promin. A group of 2 S-300 missile launcher systems were detected. The first S-300 was completely destroyed by the explosion of a Lancet kamikaze drone. At the same time, a German Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft gun was positioned right next to the first group of S-300s. A Lancet hit it and disabled the gun-guided radar. The second S-300 next to it was damaged by fragments of the first explosion. Another drone arrived and hit the head of the container and damaged the missile guidance system. Now let's move north of Promin. Now under alert, the remaining S-300 launchers took off on the main road. The Russians tried to hit them while on the move, which you can imagine is much more difficult. The Lancet explosion only damaged the launch container of a third S-300. However, a fourth one was hit, but that one was less lucky. It completely burned down. The same day in Zaporozhye, a medium-range Tor M1 air defense system also tried to flee after being detected when it was hit by loitering ammunition of the Lancet type and forced to a halt. Those are visually confirmed losses. So in the end, the Russians did not destroy an air defense division, at best, half a regiment. At best! But apart from that, the Russians also claim to have destroyed a radar model 36D6 in Donetsk. Here are the main things a 36D6M radar can do. Higher probability of detection of small air targets, hovered helicopters and targets slowly moving tangentially to the radar. Exceptional interference immunity against jammers of all types. Capability of jamming station direction finding. As you can imagine, losing such a radar is highly problematic. Once again, according to the Russian Air Force, so take it with a pinch of salt, they hit an S-300 missile system near Snusturevka. Hold on, I'm told it's actually Snigirevka. And then another S-300 complex was destroyed by a Kh-31P missile, this time near Voznesensk. Honestly, just look at this map. That was a black day for the Ukrainian air defense. And it's not a coincidence that the Russians are striking a lot of targets near Kherson. An amphibious operation across the Dnieper is in fact being planned. And it's not a coincidence that all these highly valuable equipment have been targeted this same day. Either the Russians managed to hack the command and control system of the Ukrainian forces, or they managed to spot them using their radars and electronic warfare. In either case, it's bad news. Another problem reported in Western media is that of the 2,500 Stingers that were sent to Ukraine, the Joint Staff documents indicate that only about 190 remain, which could explain the gaps left open for the Russian Air Force in the last few weeks. However, American analysts are still very optimistic. They believe that Ukraine retains enough air defense systems that it would still be very dangerous for Russian aircraft to overfly the front lines and key military facilities. I mean, to be honest, if they can achieve this outcome with only 11% of their air defense, I mean, chapeau. Let's continue with this Vietnam War theme that I started with. The Russians are currently doing something that reminds me of what the Americans did in Vietnam in 1972 with Operation Linebacker. It was an air interdiction campaign meant to disrupt the transportation of supplies for the North Vietnamese spring offensive. What a coincidence. Because of the lack of air defense, the documents also mention how the number of unprotected critical sites in Ukraine will soar from 6 to more than 40. Since mid-April, exactly like the documents said, Russia has launched numerous bombing raids. On April 30th, Pavlograd looked like this. Reportedly, 8 Russian missiles struck the Pavlograd 1 and Pavlograd 2 railway stations. I wonder what was getting unloaded at this moment. Here's a before-after of the Pavlograd chemical plant, which was hit on April 30th. Once again, question what was inside these warehouses. Some claim that it stored a batch of S-300 missiles, and perhaps that could explain the massive explosion that followed. The same night, a train carrying ammunition was destroyed near Kramatorsk. Because that means that not only did they know about the schedule of the train, it was followed by the timely detection of this specific ammo train, and then all the information was transferred for the Russian Air Force to strike. As a reminder, once again, 1 year ago, the Russians were completely unable to achieve this. On May 5th, equipment repair shops located in the Zuz Keramika enterprise in Slavyansk were hit. However, that wasn't the biggest event of the day. On May 5th, a German train filled with German Leopard 2 tanks was spotted in Odessa. And 2 days later, the Russians destroyed numerous warehouses in Odessa. It was reported that this airstrike was a result of 8 Kh-22 missiles launched by 7 Russian Tupolev 22 M3 bombers. We don't know what was in these warehouses, but Ukraine said it was food storage.
Right.
Truth be told, these warehouses could have been decoys, but I think we all know what possibly could have been stored in there. Here you can witness the destruction of another Ukrainian warehouse in Berislav near Kherson on the 8th of May. This facility probably stored some Mountain Dew and Cheetos, feeding the Reddit trolls. Anyway, if all these reports are correct, we might be witnessing a new phase in the air war in Ukraine. One of its latest iterations occurred late night on the 8th of May. According to Ukraine, 8 Tu-95MS strategic bombers and 1 Tu-22M3 long-range bomber fired a salvo of an estimated 50 X-101 and X-555 missiles. Almost every 2 days there's a new bombing raid. Lately some explosions were reported in Dnipro and Zaporozhye, but we don't have much more information than that. Both these cities are extremely strategic in terms of logistics due to the fact that they are located across the Dnieper River. In the end, the West intervened at the right time to support the decreasing capabilities of Ukraine's air defense. In October 2022, it was reported that Germany would send MAN SX-44 trucks equipped with IRIS-T SLM systems to Ukraine. There are 8 missiles mounted per launcher, separated in 2 containers of 4. And just like with the general replacement of the Ukrainian artillery with NATO units, the main advantage of this rotation is that the West has plenty of anti-air missiles. I counted roughly 3,000 IRIS-T missiles available throughout Europe that could potentially be sent to Ukraine. They have a range of 40 kilometers, which is just about the same as the Soviet-era Buk missile system. That means that, as of now, the Germans sent the equivalent of 1 air defense battery. Anyway, according to this picture, this IRIS-T battery is located in Odessa. How do we know? When the journalists went to take a picture, they also captured all this stuff, literally pointing to Odessa. It makes sense that Ukraine would want to defend Odessa because a lot of supplies come through there. Meanwhile, by April 26, the Ukrainian Air Force confirmed the full employment of 2 Patriot batteries of the PAC-2 interceptor family because the launchers came with an AN MPQ-53 radar set. The version is believed to have an operational range of up to 160 kilometers and can intercept both missiles and aircraft. Once again, the question is it gonna be enough? That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon and PayPal. The links are in the description below.